Rigorous evidence drawn from data has transformed India's growth trajectory. We have been running one of the longest longitudinal data surveys.
We started with a survey of about 41,000 households, nearly 215,000 individuals. And then we sort of grew from there to continue to study the same households over time. We know that, places like Bihar, Uttarakhand, Kerala have a lot of men who migrate without their families. What happens to the families that they leave behind? So, trying to understand some of these processes is what led us to put in place the India Human Development Survey, which started about 20 years ago.
With the coming of AI, I think everybody can use data. In the last 12 months, 1.8 million civil servants have taken a course on AI. No other country has made such a systemic effort.
Welcome to Parisila Perspectives, NCAER's platform for conversations on ideas that shape India's future. Parisila in Hindi means to examine, to study minutely, and this is also the word that bears the name of our headquarters in Delhi. Today, in this conversation on data, I am joined by two stalwarts, Dr. Sonalde Desai and Adil Zainulbhai. Dr. Desai is a demographer and a sociologist. She heads the National Data Innovation Center at NCAER, and she is also a distinguished professor at University of Maryland. And joining her is Adil, a stalwart in use of data in public policy, in the corporate. And after long years at McKinsey, he, like me, moved to serve the government and chaired the Quality Council of India and now serves on several boards and philanthropies. Today, we will explore how rigorous evidence drawn from data has transformed India's growth trajectory, as well as in the day of AI, when data is becoming so important, how it is going to shape the next 10 to 15 years of our research, public policy, which then would aid to the growth of the country. It can help you unravel the hidden truths. It can go against the intuition, but at the same time, it is so transformational that it does shape how the policy interventions take place, how the decision making on the data takes place, etc. At NCER, courtesy Sonal, we have been running one of the longest longitudinal data surveys called India Household Data Services Survey. In that, we have had tremendous insights that came through. While we will talk about IHDS today, what I'm going to tease out from my two guests here is how do they see the evolution of use of data in the coming years. And in that regard, my first question, Sonal, would be to you, that when you started this 20 years ago, what was the trigger? What was the thought? AI is so common today, data is so common today. 20 years ago, I'm sure it was not very fashionable.
See, India has always had a good data systems like National Sample Survey, National Family Health Survey. They were all designed to give you estimates of poverty rate, work participation rate, infant mortality rate, and that fed into the planning process, the various 5-year plans. The problem was that at some level, you could not think in terms of what are the processes which were leading to some of these outcomes. Okay, so that's where we sort of started looking at the India Human Development Survey. We wanted to address kind of questions. Okay, NSS tells you what percentage of Indian population migrates, but we don't understand who are these migrants. Okay, we know that places like Bihar, Uttarakhand, Kerala have a lot of men who migrate without their families. What happens to the families that they leave behind? How much remittances come? How are these remittances spent? So, trying to understand some of these processes is what led us to put in place the India Human Development Survey, which started about 20 years ago. We started with a survey of about 41,000 households, nearly 215,000 individuals. And then we sort of grew from there to continue to study the same households over time. So now we have this very rich data set of 20-year panel of these households. And so we can learn a lot of things which are relevant in the modern day. So that's been a very interesting journey.
So when you look back those 20 years and you've been so intimately involved in setting it up, helping it shape, and where we are today. Are there any areas where you think we did exceedingly well?
The first thing actually is that when we started, our hope was that we will go back to the same households time and again. Okay? And at that time, there was a lot of discouragement coming our way. You'll never be able to find those households. Okay, first time if you've gone to them and you've bored them out of their mind for a few hours, they are not going to want to talk to you again. Okay? And what we actually found was that we did really well in going back to many of those households. So over a 7-year period between 2004-5 and 2011-12, we were able to return to actually 83% of the households. Okay? And then between 2011-12 and 2022-24, we were able to go back to 78% of those households. So today we have this rich data on more than 37,000 households over a 20-year period. Okay? That I think is quite amazing. And we just feel very privileged that these families were willing to open up their homes, talk to us, and spend several hours at a time.
Oh, fascinating that is. And Adil, in your profession, you have worn different hats, but clearly at one point in time, you were user of data. Then as a policymaker, you were setting up systems and processes in which we have better quality data. Apart from IHDS, you have seen the evolution of collection of data, analysis, dissemination of the same thing, etc. How would you comment on India's journey on data over the last, let's say, 20 to 30 years?
So let me separate out two things. One is you have to have good data, otherwise you can't do much with it, right? So there's a lot of effort that goes into getting the right kind of data, cleaning it up and making sure that it is credible and transparent. Because if you don't have that, then you'll get mush out of it. So I think India has over the years gotten better and better at it. But now we're coming to a point where there is a step change required, and I'll talk about what that is. But let me talk about the second part, which is usage of data, which in my mind is very interesting because it's for everyone. So with the coming of AI, I think everybody can use data. We don't have to have 10 people who are making policy who are very seeped in all these SPSS and all these other tools to study data. With AI, anyone can use the data, and it doesn't have to all be structured the way it used to be before, and it's made it very easy. So the best way I would describe it is, if you only had a few people who could read English, then only a few people could actually use whatever data you had. But if you taught everyone to read English, then in fact they can write and they can do all sorts of things. So what AI does is, you can take all sorts of data that already exists and start doing analysis on it without being an expert at all these languages. Otherwise, there was this cult, and the cult was, I am a graduate of this university and I've done statistics, and only I can do something with this data. Today, anybody can do something with the data, and I can see, I was in the field in Bihar recently, and the health officers, the block health officers, are doing phenomenal analysis because they don't need to know anything. They just know that all this data is collected, they have access to it, they would never be able to do any analysis on it. They'd have to write a system that would take a year to write. And now overnight, actually their kids are helping them do it, which is even the most interesting things, right? So I'm very excited about the fact that use of data in decision making, in day-to-day work of government, civil servants and others will become much easier for everyone. And if they just spend a little bit of effort, they will make better decisions. And on this front, I have to say that I think India is doing a much better job than anyone else. Through the Capacity Building Commission, in the last 12 months, 1.8 million civil servants have taken a course on AI. There is no other country, don't know about China, so I can't say anything about China. No other country has made such a systemic effort to try and teach all their civil servants the basics of AI.
Sonal, given what Adil has just said, how would it affect IHDS going forward? Right now, we are just collected to 2024, and that will be releasing, that data series soon. With the advent of AI as well as better data collection techniques that could be available, and the proliferation of smartphones and processing power sitting in people's hands, Do you think, or are you beginning to think, how IHDS next round would undergo a change? Or do you think that we still need to keep the 5-year intervals? Probably we can crash them given that we have more technology at our disposal. Your thoughts?
So I think that Adil made a very good point about how the use of data will change with AI. Okay, one of the challenges that we had in the past was that when we put the data out in public domain, thousands of users are using it, and but what was happening was that many of the US and UK graduate students knew how to use the panel data. They had no problem sort of linking them, writing papers very quickly. It took us a lot of time and effort to ensure that some of the Indian students who had never worked with panel data before were able to use it accurately. So that portion of it, I can imagine, would speed up very quickly based on the AI evolution. I also think that the quality monitoring will become much easier based on the AI for us. So what we have been doing often is that people collect data, it gets uploaded from their devices. We develop quality monitoring parameters to make sure that our interviewers understand what they are doing. Nobody's cheating. Nobody's sitting under a people tree and writing up something. Okay. Now, these are the sorts of things that monitoring would become very easy using AI. Okay? That said, though, I don't think surveys are going away. Okay, there is something about sort of generating credible data from real people. Okay, that really requires sort of face-to-face interactions and surveys. Perhaps over time we might be able to do it over phones. Okay, but the way it is you're asking incredibly sensitive questions of people. Being able to look into somebody's eye and sort of explain to them what we are doing remains quite important.
I'm going to just interject here, and that gives me a thought, and probably Adil would be interested to hear about that also. See, when you talk about surveys, or when we hear about surveys, it's just like, you have this very dry process of somebody carrying a piece of paper and now probably carrying a tablet and then asking a few questions or ticking the boxes. In our conversations, you have told me a few instances and how interesting the process is, right? I think it will be interesting for us to hear that as to what is the process. So how do you engage with the respondent? How much time it takes, what kind of questions are asked, how they get recorded, and the various modes that you use to record, etc. Maybe a bit on that.
Well, let me tell you the first of all, okay? One of the problems that most surveyors have is that the individuals whom you want to survey don't want to talk to you. Okay, we are taking away their time. We are not paying them. We are often a pain in the neck sitting around while they're doing all the other activities, right? And so the question is, how do you elicit their interest and keep them engaged, especially for people like us who will go time and again to the same household? So one of the things that we started doing was we started sending them annual greeting cards in which there was a little calendar which says, thank you for being part of IHDS family, and there is a little calendar for this coming year. This very small thing, okay, made a huge difference. Now, it was difficult to send it. Mind you, are sending 45,000 greeting cards, okay? But it really made a difference in terms of how people felt. It was not a transaction. It was a two-way street at some level. Okay? The other thing that we actually found was we started also doing a lot of research on data collection methodology. What was happening was that we interviewed the same women twice and collecting data from them on how many children they have had. What we found that, to our surprise, was the first time we went there and a woman would say, I have had 4 children in my life. Next time you go there and they say, I've had 3 children. Okay? Now, that is clearly a credibility gap. Okay? So we were thinking, how does it happen? And we actually started analyzing where this gap was coming. And we found that there were 2 major predictors. One was that often daughters who had been married out were being omitted from the subsequent survey because, in their mind, daughter is married out, ye paraya ghar ki ho gayi, okay? And so they kind of omitted from telling you. The second part actually was much more sensitive in that children who had died, okay, would often get omitted because mother frankly doesn't want to talk about them, okay? Now, if we don't get accurate data, our fertility rate, infant mortality rate, sex ratio at birth are all going to be affected. So one of the things we started doing was we started teaching our interviewers, okay, don't be so transactional. Go into the household, sit down, talk to the woman you are going to interview, ask her, how many sons you have, how many daughters you have, is any of your daughters married out, where are they living? Start a conversation that will make it possible for you then to follow up, and they will also understand. You can't just ask how many children you have had who have died. You have to say that, I hope you never had to suffer a child loss. But if you did, tell me a little bit about it. So it's thinking of it in some of, these are human beings and we must interact with them as human beings is very important.
So I want to just add to what you're saying, which is once again on the theme of technology, right? I think surveys will be around for a while. The ability to do the surveys better with technology, Sonal can talk about. But I think what you can do as a result of the technology today is, for selected areas, you can do surveys much faster. One of the problems that India had in its data system was we were too dependent on a few things, right? We were dependent on the household survey that NSSO did, and the census, right? But really for decision making, we need real input very fast. For example, we had no real inputs that gave us which companies had how many people, right? We used to do it once a year or once every 2 years, and therefore our unemployment rate data was not credible. But using technology, I can do many surveys very, very quickly. So some things, if I want to find out, I should be able to find out in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. It's not the full thing. So I think the surveys will take a full spectrum from, very structured over the years, so you can see the changes, and then a whole series of things that you do that are very fast. The Indian government never did these things this fast. And I think now finally they're beginning to get their act together to say, we will do a few surveys that are faster. A lot more has to be done. But I think the ability to get faster surveys plus get fast data on many things, right? Including, the MOSPI is required to give the GDP of the country, on which many, many things depend, including investments and all of that, right? But their ability to get very quick, high frequency data to see what is happening was very poor until very recently. But with technology, you can get high frequency data. You can check what is happening to the electricity grid every hour, every day, every 2 days, right?
To add to that though, you can also do a much better quality control with technology. One of the problems is that either your interviewers make a mistake or they are deliberately sort of taking shortcuts, right? So one of the things we often do is that you would record some portion of the interview, okay? And you want to instantly go back to those people and say that, look, yesterday you were interviewing this person and you made such and such mistake. Now, listening to those recorded interviews when thousands of interviews are happening is quite difficult, okay? But my hope is that, with AI and some of the language models that will be coming in, we'll be able to summarize, Tamil interviews, Kannada interviews, Hindi interviews in a way where we can have instantaneous response to our
That's great.
interviewers. Yeah.
Just kind of switching the lens here, right? And this is a question for both of you and really would want your views on. Let's break up this whole thing into 3 parts. One is the data collection bit, right? Whether it's a primary or secondary, actual physical surveys or digitally. The second one is, shall we say, data analysis bit, and the third one being use of that to get into the policy bit. Both of you have had long exposures as practitioners, as educators, researchers in this regard. Where are we across the 3 buckets? Where are we the strongest? Where we need to strengthen our capabilities? And probably if you have any thoughts around what needs to happen. And why I'm asking you this question is because as we pivot NCER from NCER 1.0 to NCER 2.0, and we have this unique data set and ability to undertake large surveys, we have to position NCER into that evolving requirement of the country, right? So just want to pick your brains on to what lens NCR should apply, what is the requirement of the country. You spoke a little bit about the capacity of the bureaucrats to do the data analysis, but what will be your thoughts?
NCR has been very good at deep data collection. We work hard, we have understanding of what we are doing, and we focus on quality. What we haven't had an opportunity to be is to be able to do something very fast. Okay, and it's very clear that we now have to start thinking about how can we do things that are fast with the same kind of a quality, right? So some of the interesting opportunities happened during COVID. Okay. During COVID, what happened was that we had data collection in the field that was going on. Pandemic hit and we couldn't do any face-to-face data collection. We decided, but the nation needed to know, what was the impact of the lockdown and what was going on. So how can we provide a quick response? What we could do was we had actually a sampling frame of the people we had already been interviewing. We had their phone numbers. We set up a phone survey very quickly. And if you remember, the lockdown was introduced on 25th of March. Okay? By 14th of April, we actually had results of the phone survey that we released in a webinar talking about how people were experiencing lockdown, what was their reaction to if the lockdown were to be extended. And in fact, a large number of people were supportive of lockdown extension, which actually happened. Okay, so that ability to do quick surveys is going to be very important. Okay, technology exists. You can do it by phone, you can do it by at some point in time over internet, over Zoom or whatever. What you require is a framework in which we can draw the sample that is scientific sample, that's believable, reliable, etc. So putting in place a sort of a structure in which we can do these things quickly and with high level of quality would be very important.
And do you think we have the capability to do it?
I think we have the capability to do it.
We've got the capability.
I think that can be done. It requires a sort of a long-term vision and a frame in mind by which you make sure that you have appropriate sampling frame, basic data for say 250,000 people, right? Where you know their phone numbers, their some of the basic characteristics. And then all it needs is, okay, there is now LPG crisis. LPG is not available. How are people changing the diets? Then we just have this sampling frame from which we can very quickly pick up a number of people and do a quick telephone survey to provide policy inputs.
Adil, would you apply the national lens to this?
Yeah. No. So first of all, I'd start out by saying that even if some country was very good at all three, everything is up in the air now. Okay, because what they were very good at is changing so fast. So I think the reason I'm optimistic about India is it doesn't matter whether we were good, bad, or indifferent or any of it, right? We're starting for the next version, we're all starting at the same place. So we can, with a little bit of effort and with a little bit of thinking, be as good as anyone else in the world and probably better. And on some things we will be, I think. So just start with that, right? So it isn't how good were we in the past. It is the new going ahead. It's going to be different and we ought to get on it and become as good as anyone. If not as good as anyone, better than anyone else. Okay, so that's the first thing. And I would separate it into, so take data collection, right? Whatever you want to do with your long-term stuff, you do, but I need the ability to do this and do it fast. Okay, and if we can do that, that's a huge advantage. The second part is I would merge analytics and usage. Okay, because analytics for the sake of analytics is a very interesting thing for some people to do, but that's a very few people. Okay, so, some professors will want to do that. Some students will want to do that. That's great. But actually the real leverage is, can I get 500,000 civil servants to use it in their day-to-day work to answer questions, right? Don't do some massive analysis that will shape policy. It never works like that. What happens is, I have to create a policy now. I need the answers to these 5 questions quickly so that I can do something. And if I know how to do it, I'll just do it, right? So I think the real breakthrough is merge analytics and usage and make it so easy for people to use. For example, the front end that you have on your household survey, right, is wonderful for a statistical student, right? But it's not great for any bureaucrat. There'll be 3 bureaucrats in all of India who understand how to use it. because they haven't, they just haven't gone through it. I would put a front end on it that allows anyone to ask questions that are simple in English or in Hindi, and it actually uses Claude or something else to structure the programming and analysis behind to answer the question. And if we can do that, then a very large number of people will actually use the data. Right now, you don't use the data because the effort required is too much, right? I have to call Sonal and then catch her, and then maybe she will do the analysis, and a grad student will do the analysis. And 3 years later, I'll get the data and I'll have to do something. But I have to write the policy now. I have to make a decision today. Where should I put my 100 new ambulances that are coming in Bihar? Right? I have the data actually. You can work with the data to do all of that. And if the person who has to decide that can get that, then the usage is there. So I would say the biggest opportunity is to let people use a lot of the good data that is being collected today and is there, make it as easy as possible to use it, and then people will use it. And don't think about it as policy. Data should not be used just to drive policy. Data should be used to drive your actions. By the way, data for policy is very important. I'm not downplaying it at all. But I want the person who's making the policy to be able to answer their questions themselves based on this data. And then to say, what is the data architecture that makes sure that I have the data? Let's assume I can do it. So I think I would just flip it around and do it that way. We have a great opportunity to do something that is better than what anybody else is doing. We have lots of people who are smart in India who can do this. And I think the government is very open today to do interesting things. So I think our goal ought to be, once again, not just to improve, but how do we get the best data sets in the world?
Some noises get made with regard to that if all the data sets get connected, right? There could be privacy issues, there could be distrust issues that could be coming through. Is it a genuine concern, or do you think that can be managed? It's only a messaging issue when we are undertaking something of this magnitude.